A man in a blue jacket. My blood went cold. I was wearing a blue jacket, a faded Columbia windbreaker I'd had for years. I pulled it off and held it up. I'm right here. Her face drained of color. Then who the hell? That's when I heard it. My own voice, calling from behind the boulders. Wait up, guys. Don't leave me. The entire group froze. Everyone turned to stare at me, then at the boulders. That's not me, I said. The voice called again, cheerful and casual, like we were just on a regular day hike. Kyle, wait for me. I'm coming. Ben grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. We need to move. Now. We started walking again. Faster now. The group bunched tight together. The voice followed us, always staying just out of sight behind rocks or around corners, calling for us to slow down, to wait, to come back. It sounded so much like me that it made my skin crawl. Not just the voice, but the word choice, the casual phrasing. We reached Fremont Saddle, gasping for breath, not from exertion, but from fear. From here, we had a clear view of the trail we'd just climbed. If something was following us, we'd see it. We waited for 5 minutes. Nothing appeared on the trail below. Maybe it stopped, Lisa Chen whispered. Maybe it gave up. And then I heard it, right behind me, close enough that I felt breath on my neck. Hey, Kyle. I spun around. Standing at the edge of the saddle, maybe 8 feet away, was me. Not someone who resembled me. Not a twin or a look-alike. Me. Exact same face, same build, same clothes, down to the rip in the left knee of my hiking pants from catching it on barbed wire last month. It was even wearing my blue jacket, the one I'd taken off and had stuffed in my pack. I looked down. The jacket was still there, compressed into the top pocket. The thing smiled. Its teeth were too white, too perfect, too many of them. We should head back down, it said in my voice. The canyon's nice this time of day. Ben grabbed my shoulder hard. Kyle, don't look at it. We need to move. But I couldn't stop staring at my own face, my own eyes, looking back at me. Come on, it said, and it tilted its head at an angle that was wrong, too far, like its neck had extra joints. Don't you want to see what's down there? Kyle, Angela yanked my arm. Move. I forced myself to turn around. The group was already moving, half running down the far side of the saddle toward the trailhead. I followed, my legs wooden, my mind screaming. I didn't look back until we were 100 yards down the trail. When I finally did, there was nothing on the saddle, just empty rock and sky. We didn't stop running until we hit the parking lot. When we burst out of the trailhead, gasping and wild-eyed, there were 2 other groups getting ready to start the hike. They stared at us like we were crazy. We sat in the parking lot for 30 minutes, no one speaking, everyone trying to process what had just happened. Cars came and went, normal hikers, with their normal gear heading out for normal hikes. Finally, Paul Henderson broke the silence. What in the name of God was that? I didn't have an answer. Angela was the first to leave. She threw her pack in her Subaru and peeled out of the lot without saying goodbye, her face blank and shocked. The others followed shortly after. Ben was the last to go. Before he climbed in his truck, he turned to me. You're going to report this, right? To the Forest Service or Park Service or whoever needs to know? Report what? I asked. That we heard voices? That I saw myself? I saw it too, he said quietly. We all did. That wasn't some hallucination or trick of the light. That was real. I nodded, but I didn't know what I was agreeing to. He left, and I was alone in the parking lot as the sun climbed higher and the temperature pushed into the 80s. I called my supervisor from my truck, Rick Santos. Told him we'd experienced unexplained phenomena, and I'd made the decision to evacuate early as a safety precaution. What kind of phenomena? He asked. I told him. All of it. The voices, the footsteps, the thing that looked like me. There was a long silence on the other end. You know how this sounds, right? He finally said. Yeah. Another pause. But you're not joking. No. Okay, he said slowly. Okay. File a full incident report when you get back. And Kyle, maybe take a week off. You sound exhausted. I did take the week off. I spent it researching the Superstition Mountains, diving into archives at the Phoenix Public Library, reading old newspaper articles and mining journals and incident reports filed with the Tonto National Forest Service. What I found should have surprised me. It didn't. There were dozens of reports going back over 100 years. Hikers hearing voices of dead relatives. Groups encountering perfect copies of themselves on the trail. Entire parties evacuating because of acoustic anomalies and unexplained phenomena. Most of the reports were vague. People didn't want to be labeled as crazy, but the pattern was unmistakable. Something in those canyons mimics people, has been doing it for a very long time. I found one particularly detailed report from July of 1997, filed by a Forest Service ranger named Peter Yates. A group of 4 had been camping in Boulder Canyon, the same canyon we'd been in when they started hearing voices at night. By the second night, they had seen duplicates of themselves standing on the far rim. The report was clinical, professional, but reading between the lines, I could tell Yates had believed them. He'd noted that this was the 7th similar report from Boulder Canyon in the past 15 years. I tracked down Yates's contact information and called him. He'd retired in 2005 and was living in Prescott, but his number was still active. He answered on the 3rd ring. Peter Yates. Mr. Yates, my name is Kyle Brennan. I'm a wilderness guide with the Arizona Trail Association. I found an incident report you filed in 1997 about Boulder Canyon, and I was hoping you saw them too, he interrupted. Not a question, a statement. Yeah, I said. I did. We talked for 90 minutes. Peter had been a ranger in the Superstitions for 23 years. He had seen things he couldn't explain and had stopped trying to explain them. Lights moving through canyons at night with no source. Voices calling from empty trails. Footprints that appeared and disappeared. And what he called the duplicates, perfect copies of hikers that appeared on ridges and in canyons. They're not trying to hurt you, he said. At least I don't think they are. They're trying to lure you, get you to follow them deeper into the canyons, away from the main trails. People who do that, who follow their own voices or follow the duplicates, they don't come back. Or if they do come back, they come back wrong. Wrong how? Changed. I evacuated a guy in 2003 who'd followed what he thought was his hiking partner into a side canyon, found him 3 days later sitting on a rock, completely catatonic. He could walk, could eat, could follow basic commands, but it was like no one was home anymore. His wife said he wasn't the same person. Filed for divorce 6 months later. What are they? I asked. The duplicates? I spent 20 years trying to figure that out, Yates said. Best guess? Something that's been there longer than us. The Apache knew about them, avoided certain canyons completely. They call them different names in different areas. But the common thread was always the same spirits that steal faces, voices that lead you astray. Maybe there's some kind of predator that evolved to use mimicry. Maybe there's something else. I don't know. Is there a way to stop them? I asked. Stop them? No. Avoid them? Yes. Don't go into the deep canyons. Stick to the ridges and saddles where you can see. If you hear voices, get to high ground and wait them out. They seem to stay in the low areas. And if you see a duplicate of yourself or someone in your group, do not engage. Do not try to talk to it. Just leave. Before we hung up, he told me something that made my blood run cold. One more thing, he said. Sometimes they follow people home. Not physically, but in other ways. People report hearing the voices for weeks afterward, seeing their duplicates in reflections. It usually fades, but not always. If it happens to you, document everything and find someone who believes you. Don't try to handle it alone. That conversation was 3 weeks ago. The voices haven't stopped. I hear them at night sometimes, when I'm lying in bed. My own voice, calling from the hallway, asking why I left, begging me to come back to the canyon. Last week I saw myself standing in my bathroom mirror, but the reflection was smiling and I wasn't. Angela called me 2 days ago. She's hearing her dead sister's voice every night. Ben emailed to say he's seeing his duplicate in crowds just for a second, disappearing when he looks directly at it. I haven't been back to the superstitions. I've turned down every trip that goes into Boulder Canyon, told my supervisor I won't guide that route anymore. He didn't push. I think he knows, but I don't think it matters where I go. Whatever was in that canyon, it followed me out, and I don't know if it's ever going to let me go. If you're planning to hike the Superstition Mountains, know this. Some canyons are older than the trails that cut through them, older than the legends, and what lives there has been perfecting its mimicry for longer than we can imagine. Stay on the ridges. Don't go into the deep canyons alone. And if you hear your own voice calling to you from the shadows, run. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to confront it. Just run and pray it doesn't follow you home. Story 3. The thing that climbed with us at 14,000 feet. Something that wasn't human started climbing up behind us. By the time we realized what was happening, it was already too late for two of us. My name is Trevor Hale, and I need to write this down while I still remember it clearly. The doctors say I have frostbite-induced memory loss, that the hypoxia and cold scrambled my brain at altitude. They say I'm confabulating, filling in gaps with false memories. They say I went up Long's Peak with 2 friends and came down alone because I left them to die. They're wrong about the last part. I didn't leave them. Something took them, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, while I still can, while I still remember their faces. I am 36 years old and I've been a mountaineering instructor for 12 years. I work for Colorado Mountain School in Estes Park, guiding climbers up everything from basic scrambles to technical ice routes. Long's Peak is my backyard. I've summited it 63 times in every season by every major route. The Keyhole route in summer when it's a crowded scramble. The Cables route in spring when snow still chokes the couloirs. The Diamond in winter when it's just you and 1,000 feet of vertical ice and the wind trying to rip you off the mountain. I know that peak better than I know my own apartment. Every boulder field, every ledge, every place where the rock changes color or the exposure gets severe. I know where avalanches slide and where cornices build up and where the afternoon lightning strikes tend to hit. In 12 years of guiding, I've never lost a client, never had a serious injury, never made a call I regretted. Until January 13th, 2024. The trip was supposed to be straightforward. A winter ascent of Long's Peak via the Keyhole route with 2 experienced clients who wanted to tick a 14er in winter conditions. Not a technical climb, no ropes, no ice tools, just crampons and ice axes and cold weather gear. The Keyhole route is the easiest path up Long's Peak, a 9-mile round trip with 5,000 feet of elevation gain. In summer, it's almost a walk up, if you don't count the exposure and the altitude. In winter, it's a different beast entirely. The thing's smile faltered. I took another step. It backed away from the edge. That's when I understood. It couldn't cross the water. I tested the theory. I walked down to the riverbank, staying on my side, and the thing mirrored my movements on the opposite shore. When I got within 5 feet of the water, it was at least 10 feet back from its edge. "You can't cross, can you?" I said out loud. The thing tilted its head. Its smile was gone now. It just stared at me with my own eyes. I started walking again, following the trail, and the thing paced me on the far side of the river. Sometimes it would get ahead of me, sometimes it would fall behind, but it never crossed the water. It never even tried. This went on for 3 miles. 3 miles of that thing walking parallel to me, wearing my face, carrying a phantom version of my pack. Every time I glanced over, it was there, watching, waiting. The trail eventually curved away from the river, climbing up into the hills. I looked back one last time before the trees blocked my view, and the thing was standing at the water's edge, motionless. It didn't follow me after that. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sun was setting. My truck was the only vehicle in the lot, and sitting on the hood was a woman in a National Park Service uniform. She was in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back and a ponytail and a weathered face that had seen a lot of sun. She watched me limp across the parking lot, not saying anything until I was a few feet away. "You Connor Hayes?" she asked. I nodded, too exhausted to be surprised that she knew my name. "Trail register," she said, gesturing toward the board. You're a day early. Return date was listed as October 14th. I had to cut the trip short, I said. She looked at my leg. You need medical attention? I'm an EMT. It's just bruised. I can handle it. She nodded slowly, studying my face. You see anything unusual out there? The question was so direct, so matter-of-fact, that I didn't know how to answer. I could have lied. I could have said no. But something about the way she asked, like she already knew the answer, made me tell the truth. There was something on the trail, I said, following me. It looked like me. She didn't react, didn't laugh, didn't look skeptical. She just nodded, like I had confirmed something she already suspected. It'd stay on the other side of the river? She asked. How did you... This isn't the first report, she said. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small business card. It had a phone number on it, nothing else. Call this number when you get home. Ask for Bill. He'll want to hear what happened. Who's Bill? Someone who knows about these things. She handed me the card and walked back to her truck. Before she got in, she turned and looked at me one more time. Don't come back to this trail, she said. Whatever you saw out there, it knows you now. And they don't forget. I drove straight to Olympic Medical Center in Port Angeles. My shin was swollen to twice its normal size, and every time I pressed the brake pedal, pain shot up my leg. The ER doctor took x-rays, confirmed there were no fractures, and wrapped it in a compression bandage. He prescribed ibuprofen and told me to stay off it for a week. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the thing wearing my face, standing on the far side of the river. I called the number on the card 2 days later. A man answered on the second ring. Bill Katsaros. Ranger Simmons gave me this number, I said. I was on the Hoh River Trail. I saw something. You the solo backpacker? Connor Hayes. How did you know? I've been doing this a long time, he said. Tell me what happened. I told him everything. The footsteps, the voice mimicry, the thing wearing my face, how it wouldn't cross the water. Bill was quiet for a long time when I finished. Then he said, You did the right thing, crossing the water, staying on the move. What was it? I asked. We call them mimics, he said. They're rare, but they show up in old-growth forests, Olympic, Quinault, parts of the North Cascades. No one knows what they are. Best guess is they're some kind of predator that evolved to use camouflage. Camouflage? They copy what they see, Bill said. Voices, faces, mannerisms. Theory is they use it to lure prey. Get someone to come closer, get them isolated, and then, well, we don't know what happens after that. We've never found bodies. My stomach turned. How do you stop them? You don't, he said. You stay away from them. And if you encounter one, you get to running water as fast as you can and you cross it. They won't follow. We don't know why, but they can't or won't cross running water. Has anyone ever tried to study them? I asked. Tried, Bill said. Lost 2 researchers in the 90s. After that, the Forest Service decided it was better to just keep people away from the areas where they're active. Is that why the trail was empty? I asked. Do you keep people out? Not officially, he said, but we spread the word. Experienced hikers know to avoid certain trails. The tourists and weekend warriors don't last long enough to report anything useful. I didn't know what to say to that. Listen, Bill said, you're lucky you had the presence of mind to cross the water. Most people freeze up, or they try to talk to it, thinking it's someone they know. That's when they disappear. What should I have done differently? I asked. Nothing, he said. You did everything right. You stayed calm, you recognized the threat, and you got away. The only thing I'd add is this. If you ever find yourself in a situation like that again, don't engage with it. Don't talk to it, don't acknowledge it, and for God's sake, don't tell it your name if it doesn't already know it. Why not? Because once it knows your name, it can call to you. And for some reason, that makes it harder to resist. We talked for another 20 minutes. He asked about the trail conditions, the time of day, the weather. He took notes, said he'd file a report with the Forest Service. Before we hung up, he gave me his personal cell number. If you ever see anything like this again, he said, call me, day or night. I haven't been back to Olympic National Forest. I still hike. It's the only thing that keeps me sane after a rough shift, but I stick to day hikes now, popular trails with other people around. And I carry a whistle, a satellite phone, and enough bear spray to take down a grizzly. But sometimes late at night when I'm lying in bed, I think about the thing that wore my face. I wonder if it's still out there pacing the far side of the Hoh River, waiting for another solo backpacker who doesn't know the rules. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd crossed back over the water to confront it, if I'd let it get close enough to touch. I think about that smile, those too many teeth, and I'm glad I'll never know the answer. If you're planning a solo trip into the backcountry, especially old-growth forests in the Pacific Northwest, here's what you need to remember. If you encounter something that mimics you, your voice, or someone you know, do not engage with it. Get to running water as fast as you can and cross it. Don't stop to investigate. Don't try to reason with it. And whatever you do, don't let it hear you say your name out loud. Stay on the trails. Stay aware. And if you hear your own voice calling to you from the trees, run, because it means something has already studied you long enough to copy you perfectly. Story 2. Voices in the Canyon. I heard my own voice screaming for help from deep inside the canyon, but I was standing at the rim with my mouth shut and my hand clamped over it to make sure. Let me back up, because what happened on Peralta Trail that week doesn't make sense without context. My name is Kyle Brennan. I am 28 years old, and I've been a wilderness guide for the Arizona Trail Association for 6 years. Before that, I was a ski instructor in Flagstaff, and before that I was pre-med at Arizona State, until I realized I'd rather die than spend my life in a hospital. I've led hundreds of people through the Sonoran Desert college groups, corporate team-building exercises, retirees looking for one last adventure before their knees give out. I know this landscape intimately. The saguaros standing like sentinels with their arms raised, the ocotillo reaching skeletal branches toward impossible blue sky, the way heat shimmers off volcanic rock at noon and makes distant ridges look like they're underwater. I know which trails flood during monsoon season when the washes fill with chocolate brown water in minutes. I know which water sources are reliable and which ones are contaminated with cattle runoff. I know where the western diamondback rattlesnakes den up in winter and exactly how much clearance to give a Gila monster in spring. I can read the desert like some people read books. Every plant, every rock formation, every shift in the wind tells me something. What I didn't know until March of 2024 was that some parts of the desert aren't meant to be explored. Some canyons aren't empty, and some voices calling for help from the bottom of those canyons aren't human, no matter how much they sound like someone you know. The Superstition Mountains sit about 40 miles east of Phoenix, a jagged sprawl of volcanic rock and slot canyons that's been swallowing people for over 150 years. The range got its name from Pima and Apache legend stories passed down through generations about a hole in the mountain where the devil lives, about spirits that lead travelers astray into the maze of stone, about thunder gods who guard the peaks and kill anyone who disturbs them. The Apache called it Thunder Mountain and mostly stayed away from certain sections. Most hikers know the superstitions because of the Lost Dutchman mine, a legendary gold deposit supposedly hidden somewhere in the mountains. Jacob Waltz, a German immigrant, claimed to have found it in the 1870s. He died in 1891 without revealing its location, and people have been looking ever since. Hundreds of prospectors over the decades. Some came back empty-handed, half-dead from dehydration and sun exposure. A lot of them didn't come back at all. Their bodies turn up sometimes. Decades later, wedged in crevices, scattered across canyon floors, mummified by the dry desert air into leathery husks that barely look human anymore. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office has 3 filing cabinets dedicated to Superstition Mountain's disappearances. I've seen them. I dated a deputy for 6 months last year, and she showed me once. Row after row of missing persons reports, some dating back to the 1930s, most unsolved. People who walked into those mountains and never walked out. I never believed in curses or legends or supernatural explanations. I believed in dehydration, heat stroke, rattlesnake bites, and people who go off trail without enough water or common sense. The desert kills you through physics and biology. Your core temperature rises, your brain swells, your kidneys shut down. That's science. That's real. Ghosts and spirits and thunder gods are stories people tell to explain away their own poor planning. At least that's what I thought before the trip, before I saw myself standing on a ridge 200 yards away, staring back at me. Before I heard my own voice begging for help from the bottom of a canyon I was standing above, my mouth clamped shut to make sure the sound wasn't coming from me. The trip was supposed to be simple. 3 days, 2 nights, guiding a group of 6 through the superstitions. We'd start at Peralta Trailhead, hike up to Fremont Saddle for the panoramic view of Weaver's Needle, that 500-foot volcanic plug that rises from the canyon floor like a jagged black tooth, then drop down into Boulder Canyon and camp near the seasonal creek. Day 2 would take us deeper into the range, along a less traveled route, and we'd loop back to the trailhead on day 3. Total mileage, 18.3 miles. Total elevation gain, 3,200 feet. Difficulty rating, moderate to challenging, depending on how you handled heat and elevation. My group was solid, which isn't always the case. Sometimes I get assigned total beginners who think hiking means a paved path with water fountains every mile. This group had experience. 2 married couples in their mid-40s, Paul and Rachel Henderson from Scottsdale, both architects who hiked regularly, and Tom and Lisa Chen from Tempe, who'd done sections of the Arizona Trail before. Then there was Angela Martinez, 32, a solo hiker from Tucson who'd completed the Grand Canyon rim to rim twice and had that lean, weathered look of someone who spent more time outside than in. And finally, Ben Foster, a quiet guy around my age who worked in IT for some tech company and didn't talk much but moved efficiently and kept up with the pace without complaining. Everyone had the right gear when I checked at the pre-trip meeting. Broken-in boots, moisture-wicking layers, sun protection, and most importantly, enough water capacity. I'm strict about water. 3 liters minimum per person per day, and that's conservative. In March, the temperatures are mild compared to summer, but mild in the Sonoran Desert still means mid-80s by afternoon, and at elevation with full sun exposure, you can go through a liter every 2 hours without realizing it. We met at the Peralta Trailhead parking lot at 6 in the morning on March 22nd, 2024. Friday. The lot was already a third full even at that early hour. Spring is peak season in the superstitions. That narrow window after winter rains green up the desert, but before summer heat makes the trails dangerous. The temperature was 58 degrees. Forecast to hit 86 by 2 in the afternoon. Perfect conditions. I did my standard pre-hike briefing. Head count, gear check, route overview. We're looking at roughly 5 miles to our first camp, I explained, pointing to the laminated map. The trail gains about 1,200 feet in the first 2 miles, so it's going to feel steep. We'll take it slow and steady. Once we hit Fremont Saddle at around 4,000 feet, we'll break for lunch and photos. The view of Weaver's Needle from the saddle is why most people do this trail. Then we drop into Boulder Canyon, lose about 800 feet of elevation over a mile and a half, and set up camp near the cottonwoods where the seasonal creek usually runs. Questions? Ben raised his hand. What's the water situation in the canyon? The creek's seasonal, I said. March we're usually okay, especially after the winter rains we had, but I'm carrying an emergency 3-gallon reserve just in case. Everyone's responsible for their own filtration. No other questions. We started hiking at 6:20. The Peralta Trail is one of the most popular routes in the superstitions, and for good reason. The first section winds through classic Sonoran Desert vegetation, towering saguaros with their arms bent at improbable angles, clusters of teddy bear cholla that look fuzzy from a distance but will ruin your day if you brush against them, barrel cacti squatting in the washes like fat green grenades. Palo Verde trees were just starting to bloom, tiny yellow flowers creating patches of color against the reddish volcanic soil. The trail surface was good packed dirt and decomposed granite with some loose rock in the steeper sections. We made solid time. The group stayed together naturally, no one lagging or pushing ahead. Paul Henderson was up front with me, asking questions about the geology. Ben was in the middle, quiet but alert, stopping occasionally to take photos with an expensive-looking camera. Angela brought up the rear, moving with that efficient long-distance hiker stride that eats up miles without seeming to try. By 8:30, we'd climbed out of the low desert scrub and into rockier terrain where the vegetation thinned and the canyon walls started closing in on either side. The trail got steeper, switchbacking up a talus slope, and I could hear people breathing harder. I called for a water break at a shaded spot beneath an overhang. "Drink at least half a liter," I said. "We've got another 400 feet of climbing before the saddle." Everyone complied. Rachel Henderson was flushed, but smiling. "This is gorgeous," she said, gesturing at the view opening up behind us, miles of desert basin, with Phoenix visible as a brown smudge in the distance. We reached Fremont Saddle at 9:45. The saddle is a narrow gap between two peaks, and on a clear day, which this was, you get one of the most iconic views in Arizona. Weaver's Needle rises from Boulder Canyon like a monument, 500 feet of dark volcanic rock standing alone, its sides nearly vertical. It's been a landmark for centuries. The Apache used it for navigation. The Spanish missionaries painted it in their maps, and now hundreds of hikers every week make this climb just to take its picture. Everyone spread out along the saddle, pulling out cameras and phones. I sat on a flat rock and ate my lunch turkey sandwich on wheat, apple, trail mix. The temperature had climbed into the low 70s, and there was almost no shade up here, but a steady breeze from the west kept it comfortable. That's when Angela walked over, frowning. "Kyle, can I ask you something?" "Sure." She pointed down into Boulder Canyon, the deep cleft that dropped away from the saddle into shadow. "Is there another hiking group down there, in the canyon?" I followed her gaze. Boulder Canyon was a maze of rock walls and boulder fields, the bottom obscured by distance and the angle of the sun creating deep shadows. "Not that I know of. We're the only group I have scheduled for this section this week." "Why?" "I thought I saw someone moving. Down near the bottom, maybe a quarter mile in. I only saw them for a second before they went behind some rocks." I pulled out my binoculars and scanned the canyon floor. Nothing but boulders and scattered mesquite trees and shadows. Could have been a bighorn sheep. They're active this time of year and they blend in with the rocks. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Yeah, probably." I didn't think much of it at the time. People see movement in the desert all the time. It's usually wildlife or heat shimmer or their own eyes playing tricks in the intense light. I finished my lunch and gave the group another 15 minutes to rest and take photos. We started the descent into Boulder Canyon at 10:30. This is where the Peralta Trail gets interesting. You drop 800 feet in a little over a mile, which doesn't sound like much until you're actually doing it. The trail is steep and loose, lots of scree and small rocks that want to slide under your boots. The switchbacks are tight, and there's enough exposure in a few spots that you don't want to slip. I always position myself at the back of the group on descents, making sure no one falls too far behind or takes a wrong turn. We were halfway down, maybe 20 minutes into the descent, when Ben stopped abruptly and held up his hand. "You hear that?" he asked. I stopped. The group bunched up behind me. "Hear what?" Voices. Sounded like someone talking, maybe arguing. I listened hard. The canyon was quiet except for the wind sliding over rocks and the occasional cry of a raven echoing off the walls. Sound does weird things in canyons. It bounces, distorts, carries for miles sometimes. "Probably just wind," I said. "Or another group on a different section of trail. Sound carries strange in here." But Ben wasn't the only one. 10 minutes later, Rachel Henderson stopped and turned around, her face pale. Someone just called my name. Her husband Paul looked at her with concern. "What?" "I didn't hear anything," a woman's voice. It said Rachel clear as day, like someone right next to me. I walked up to where she was standing. "Where did it come from?" She pointed toward a side drainage choked with house-sized boulders, a narrow slot canyon that branched off from the main trail. "From in there." It sounded close, right in there. I pulled out my binoculars and glassed the drainage carefully. Nothing. Just rocks and shadows and a few scraggly mesquite trees clinging to cracks in the stone. I don't see anyone. Could have been an echo of someone's voice from the main trail carried through the canyon. There's no one else here, she said, and her voice had an edge to it now. I can see the whole trail behind us and ahead of us. We're the only people. She was right. The trail was empty in both directions. Let's keep moving, I said, trying to sound reassuring. We're burning daylight, and I want to be in camp before the afternoon heat hits. We reached the canyon floor around noon. The seasonal creek was running, which was good news, a thin trickle of clear water flowing over bedrock, barely 6 inches deep, but enough to filter for camp use. I had scouted this campsite on a previous trip and knew it was solid. Flat ground beneath a cluster of scraggly cottonwood trees that provided some shade, decent wind protection from the canyon walls, and far enough from the wash that we wouldn't have to worry if a freak storm kicked up. We'll set up here, I announced, dropping my pack. Get your tents up, hydrate, and rest during the heat of the day. We've got a short exploratory hike planned for this evening. When it cools down, there's some pictographs about a mile up canyon that are worth seeing. The group scattered to claim tent spots. I set up my own shelter, a lightweight tarp system I could pitch in under 5 minutes, and then got to work filtering water from the creek. By 1 in the afternoon, everyone was settled and the temperature had climbed into the low 80s. Most people were in their tents, napping or reading. I was lying in the shade of my tarp, reading a dog-eared paperback thriller when I heard it, my own voice, calling for help. The book slid from my hands. I sat up, my heart rate spiking. The sound was coming from deeper in the canyon, maybe a quarter mile away, faint but unmistakable. Help! Someone help me. It was my voice, my exact voice, the slight rasp I get when I'm dehydrated, the way I tend to clip the ends of words. Even the cadence was right. I scrambled out from under the tarp and stood, scanning the canyon. The camp was quiet. Tom Chen was visible in his tent, reading. Angela was sitting against a cottonwood with a book. No one else seemed to have heard it. Help, please. Louder now. More desperate. I walked toward the sound, my pulse hammering. The canyon stretched ahead, narrowing as it cut deeper into the mountains. Walls of dark volcanic rock rose 300 feet on either side, creating deep shadow even in the middle of the day. Kyle? Angela had gotten up and was walking toward me. What's wrong? Did you hear that? I asked. Hear what? My skin went cold. Someone calling for help. It sounded like I stopped myself. How do you explain that you heard your own voice calling for help when you're standing right here? I didn't hear anything, she said, studying my face. Are you okay? You look pale. I nodded, but I wasn't. My hands were shaking slightly, and my mouth was dry, despite having just drank a full liter of water. That's when Ben emerged from his tent, his face white as paper. I heard it too, he said quietly. It was you, your voice, calling for help from up canyon. Angela looked between us. What are you talking about? There's someone in the canyon, Ben said, and they're mimicking Kyle. The words hung in the air. I wanted to deny it, wanted to explain it away, but I couldn't, because I'd heard it too. Help me. I'm hurt. All three of us heard it that time. My voice, desperate and frightened, coming from the shadowed narrows about 300 yards up canyon. Angela's face had gone pale. What the hell is that? I didn't have an answer, but I knew we needed to get control of the situation before it spiraled into panic. I walked back to camp and got everyone's attention. The Hendersons and Chens emerged from their tents, looking concerned. Listen up, I said, keeping my voice calm and level. We're experiencing some kind of acoustic phenomenon in this canyon. Some of you have heard voices, including what sounds like people you know. Ben and I both just heard what sounded like my voice calling for help from up canyon. Rachel heard her name called on the trail. I don't have an explanation for what's causing it right now, but here's what we're going to do. I paused, making eye contact with each person. No one leaves camp alone, period. If you need to use the bathroom, take a partner. If you hear voices calling to you, any voices, even if they sound like someone you know, you ignore them. Do not investigate, do not respond, do not go looking for the source. We stay together, we stay in camp, and we wait this out. Understood? Everyone nodded, but I could see fear in their faces. Lisa Chen had her arms wrapped around herself despite the heat. Paul Henderson had his jaw clenched tight. What do you think it is? Tom Chen asked. Some kind of echo effect? Could be, I said, though I didn't believe it. Could be other hikers playing a prank. Could be acoustic anomalies caused by the canyon structure. But until we figure it out, we play it safe. We spent the rest of the afternoon in camp. No one wanted to do the evening pictograph hike. People stayed close to their tents, talking in low voices, jumping at every sound. I tried to maintain a calm presence, but internally I was running through scenarios. Should I call for evacuation? We had another full day of hiking planned, but if this phenomenon continued, if people got more scared, we might need to bail early. Around 5 in the afternoon, I walked to the edge of camp to get cell signal and check in with my supervisor. No signal. Not surprising, we were deep in a canyon, surrounded by rock walls. I had a satellite phone in my pack for emergencies, but I wasn't sure this qualified yet. What would I tell search and rescue? That we were hearing voices? The sun set around 7, and the temperature dropped fast. By 7:30, it was in the low 50s, and the canyon was in deep shadow. We ate dinner early, everyone heating freeze-dried meals on their camp stoves, and no one strayed far from the circle of tents. That's when the voices started in earnest. They came from everywhere. My voice calling for help, Rachel's voice screaming, Ben's voice whispering urgently just outside the circle of light from our headlamps. Angela heard her dead sister's voice, her sister who'd been killed in a drunk driving accident 3 years ago. Tom Chen heard his father calling him, using his childhood nickname that only family knew. The voices moved. 1 minute they'd be up canyon, the next down canyon, then they'd be right behind us, so close it felt like we could reach out and touch whoever was speaking. No one slept. I sat outside my tarp with my headlamp on, trying to pinpoint where the sounds originated, but they defied location. The acoustics in the canyon should have made it easy to track sound, would bounce off the walls in predictable ways, but these voices seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. At 9:30, I heard footsteps, clear as day, boots crunching on gravel, moving through camp. I swept my headlamp around in a circle. Nothing. Everyone was in their tents, zippers drawn tight. The footsteps continued, circling the entire camp. I could hear the crunch of each step, could almost feel the vibration through the ground. Kyle? Tom Chen's voice came from his tent, tight with fear. What's out there? I don't know, I said honestly, because I didn't. The footsteps had no source, no body attached to them. They stopped directly behind me. I spun around, headlamp beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing. At 10:15, the voices stopped, just cut off mid-sentence, leaving a silence so complete and absolute that it felt like being underwater. My ears rang in the absence of sound. I waited, barely breathing, but nothing else happened. Eventually, I crawled under my tarp and tried to sleep. I managed maybe an hour, fitful and full of half-dreams about voices calling my name from the dark. When the sun rose at 6:20, I'd already made my decision. We were leaving. I didn't care if it made me look paranoid or incompetent. I didn't care if there was some rational explanation we were missing. Something was wrong with this canyon, and I wasn't going to risk my group's safety to figure out what. I woke everyone at 6:30. We're packing up and heading back to the trailhead. Something's not right here, and I'm making the call to evacuate. No one argued. If anything, people looked relieved. We broke camp in record time, 40 minutes flat. By 7:20, we were on the trail, retracing our route back toward Fremont Saddle. We made it half a mile before Angela stopped dead. There's someone following us, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned around. The trail behind us was empty, just the narrow path cutting through the boulder field. Where? She pointed to a cluster of rocks about 50 yards back, right at the edge of my vision. Behind those boulders. I saw someone duck behind them, a man in a blue jacket. My blood went cold. I was wearing a blue jacket, a faded Columbia windbreaker I'd had for years. I pulled it off and held it up. I'm right here. Her face drained of color. Then who the hell? That's when I heard it. My own voice, calling from behind the boulders. Wait up, guys. Don't leave me. The entire group froze. Everyone turned to stare at me, then at the boulders. That's not me, I said. The voice called again, cheerful and casual, like we were just on a regular day hike. Kyle, wait for me. I'm coming. Ben grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. We need to move. Now. We started walking again. Faster now. The group bunched tight together. The voice followed us, always staying just out of sight behind rocks or around corners, calling for us to slow down, to wait, to come back. It sounded so much like me that it made my skin crawl. Not just the voice, but the word choice, the casual phrasing. We reached Fremont Saddle, gasping for breath, not from exertion, but from fear. From here, we had a clear view of the trail we'd just climbed. If something was following us, we'd see it. We waited for 5 minutes. Nothing appeared on the trail below. Maybe it stopped, Lisa Chen whispered. Maybe it gave up. And then I heard it, right behind me, close enough that I felt breath on my neck. Hey, Kyle. I spun around. Standing at the edge of the saddle, maybe 8 feet away, was me. Not someone who resembled me. Not a twin or a look-alike. Me. Exact same face, same build, same clothes, down to the rip in the left knee of my hiking pants from catching it on barbed wire last month. It was even wearing my blue jacket, the one I'd taken off and had stuffed in my pack. I looked down. The jacket was still there, compressed into the top pocket. The thing smiled. Its teeth were too white, too perfect, too many of them. We should head back down, it said in my voice. The canyon's nice this time of day. Ben grabbed my shoulder hard. Kyle, don't look at it. We need to move. But I couldn't stop staring at my own face, my own eyes, looking back at me. Come on, it said, and it tilted its head at an angle that was wrong, too far, like its neck had extra joints. Don't you want to see what's down there? Kyle, Angela yanked my arm. Move. I forced myself to turn around. The group was already moving, half running down the far side of the saddle toward the trailhead. I followed, my legs wooden, my mind screaming. I didn't look back until we were 100 yards down the trail. When I finally did, there was nothing on the saddle, just empty rock and sky. We didn't stop running until we hit the parking lot. When we burst out of the trailhead, gasping and wild-eyed, there were 2 other groups getting ready to start the hike. They stared at us like we were crazy. We sat in the parking lot for 30 minutes, no one speaking, everyone trying to process what had just happened. Cars came and went, normal hikers, with their normal gear heading out for normal hikes. Finally, Paul Henderson broke the silence. What in the name of God was that? I didn't have an answer. Angela was the first to leave. She threw her pack in her Subaru and peeled out of the lot without saying goodbye, her face blank and shocked. The others followed shortly after. Ben was the last to go. Before he climbed in his truck, he turned to me. You're going to report this, right? To the Forest Service or Park Service or whoever needs to know? Report what? I asked. That we heard voices? That I saw myself? I saw it too, he said quietly. We all did. That wasn't some hallucination or trick of the light. That was real. I nodded, but I didn't know what I was agreeing to. He left, and I was alone in the parking lot as the sun climbed higher and the temperature pushed into the 80s. I called my supervisor from my truck, Rick Santos. Told him we'd experienced unexplained phenomena, and I'd made the decision to evacuate early as a safety precaution. What kind of phenomena? He asked. I told him. All of it. The voices, the footsteps, the thing that looked like me. There was a long silence on the other end. You know how this sounds, right? He finally said. Yeah. Another pause. But you're not joking. No. Okay, he said slowly. Okay. File a full incident report when you get back. And Kyle, maybe take a week off. You sound exhausted. I did take the week off. I spent it researching the Superstition Mountains, diving into archives at the Phoenix Public Library, reading old newspaper articles and mining journals and incident reports filed with the Tonto National Forest Service. What I found should have surprised me. It didn't. There were dozens of reports going back over 100 years. Hikers hearing voices of dead relatives. Groups encountering perfect copies of themselves on the trail. Entire parties evacuating because of acoustic anomalies and unexplained phenomena. Most of the reports were vague. People didn't want to be labeled as crazy, but the pattern was unmistakable. Something in those canyons mimics people, has been doing it for a very long time. I found one particularly detailed report from July of 1997, filed by a Forest Service ranger named Peter Yates. A group of 4 had been camping in Boulder Canyon, the same canyon we'd been in, when they started hearing voices at night. By the second night, they had seen duplicates of themselves standing on the far rim. The report was clinical, professional, but reading between the lines, I could tell Yates had believed them. He'd noted that this was the 7th similar report from Boulder Canyon in the past 15 years. I tracked down Yates's contact information and called him. He'd retired in 2005 and was living in Prescott, but his number was still active. He answered on the 3rd ring. Peter Yates. Mr. Yates, my name is Kyle Brennan. I'm a wilderness guide with the Arizona Trail Association. I found an incident report you filed in 1997 about Boulder Canyon, and I was hoping you saw them too, he interrupted. Not a question, a statement. Yeah, I said. I did. We talked for 90 minutes. Peter had been a ranger in the superstitions for 23 years. He had seen things he couldn't explain and had stopped trying to explain them. Lights moving through canyons at night with no source. Voices calling from empty trails. Footprints that appeared and disappeared. And what he called the duplicates, perfect copies of hikers that appeared on ridges and in canyons. They're not trying to hurt you, he said. At least I don't think they are. They're trying to lure you. Get you to follow them deeper into the canyons, away from the main trails. People who do that, who follow their own voices or follow the duplicates, they don't come back. Or if they do come back, they come back wrong. Wrong how? Changed. I evacuated a guy in 2003 who'd followed what he thought was his hiking partner into a side canyon. Found him 3 days later sitting on a rock, completely catatonic. He could walk, could eat, could follow basic commands, but it was like no one was home anymore. His wife said he wasn't the same person. Filed for divorce 6 months later. What are they? I asked. The duplicates? I spent 20 years trying to figure that out, Yates said. Best guess? Something that's been there longer than us. The Apache knew about them, avoided certain canyons completely. They call them different names in different areas. But the common thread was always the same spirits that steal faces, voices that lead you astray. Maybe there's some kind of predator that evolved to use mimicry. Maybe there's something else. I don't know. Is there a way to stop them? I asked. Stop them? No. Avoid them? Yes. Don't go into the deep canyons. Stick to the ridges and saddles where you can see. If you hear voices, get to high ground and wait them out. They seem to stay in the low areas. And if you see a duplicate of yourself or someone in your group, do not engage. Do not try to talk to it. Just leave. Before we hung up, he told me something that made my blood run cold. One more thing, he said. Sometimes they follow people home. Not physically, but in other ways. People report hearing the voices for weeks afterward, seeing their duplicates in reflections. It usually fades, but not always. If it happens to you, document everything and find someone who believes you. Don't try to handle it alone. That conversation was 3 weeks ago. The voices haven't stopped. I hear them at night sometimes, when I'm lying in bed. My own voice, calling from the hallway, asking why I left, begging me to come back to the canyon. Last week I saw myself standing in my bathroom mirror, but the reflection was smiling and I wasn't. Angela called me 2 days ago. She's hearing her dead sister's voice every night. Ben emailed to say he's seeing his duplicate in crowds just for a second, disappearing when he looks directly at it. I haven't been back to the superstitions. I've turned down every trip that goes into Boulder Canyon, told my supervisor I won't guide that route anymore. He didn't push. I think he knows, but I don't think it matters where I go. Whatever was in that canyon, it followed me out, and I don't know if it's ever going to let me go. If you're planning to hike the Superstition Mountains, know this. Some canyons are older than the trails that cut through them, older than the legends, and what lives there has been perfecting its mimicry for longer than we can imagine. Stay on the ridges. Don't go into the deep canyons alone. And if you hear your own voice calling to you from the shadows, run. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to confront it. Just run and pray it doesn't follow you home. Story 3. The thing that climbed with us. At 14,000 feet, something that wasn't human started climbing up behind us. By the time we realized what was happening, it was already too late for two of us. My name is Trevor Hale, and I need to write this down while I still remember it clearly. The doctors say I have frostbite-induced memory loss, that the hypoxia and cold scrambled my brain at altitude. They say I'm confabulating, filling in gaps with false memories. They say I went up Long's Peak with 2 friends and came down alone because I left them to die. They're wrong about the last part. I didn't leave them. Something took them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, while I still can, while I still remember their faces. I am 36 years old and I've been a mountaineering instructor for 12 years. I work for Colorado Mountain School in Estes Park, guiding climbers up everything from basic scrambles to technical ice routes. Long's Peak is my backyard. I've summited it 63 times in every season by every major route. The Keyhole route in summer when it's a crowded scramble. The Cables route in spring when snow still chokes the couloirs. The Diamond in winter when it's just you and 1,000 feet of vertical ice and the wind trying to rip you off the mountain. I know that peak better than I know my own apartment. Every boulder field, every ledge, every place where the rock changes color or the exposure gets severe. I know where avalanches slide and where cornices build up and where the afternoon lightning strikes tend to hit. In 12 years of guiding, I've never lost a client, never had a serious injury, never made a call I regretted. Until January 13th, 2024. The trip was supposed to be straightforward. A winter ascent of Long's Peak via the Keyhole route with 2 experienced clients who wanted to tick a 14er in winter conditions. Not a technical climb, no ropes, no ice tools, just crampons and ice axes and cold weather gear. The Keyhole route is the easiest path up Long's Peak, a 9-mile round trip with 5,000 feet of elevation gain. In summer, it's almost a walk up, if you don't count the exposure and the altitude. In winter, it's a different beast entirely. The 2 clients were brothers, Jake and Simon Reeves from Denver, both in their early 30s, both strong climbers with solid winter experience. Jake was the older one, a civil engineer who'd done Rainier and Shasta and half a dozen peaks in the Alaska Range. Simon was a search and rescue volunteer with Rocky Mountain Rescue, the kind of guy who spent his weekends hauling injured hikers off cliffs. They'd hired me not because they needed instruction, but because they wanted someone who knew the mountain intimately in winter conditions, who could make route-finding decisions when snow obscured the trail. We met at the Long's Peak trailhead at 2 in the morning on January 13th. The parking lot was empty, except for my truck and their Jeep. The temperature was 8 degrees Fahrenheit, forecast to drop to -5 at the summit, with winds gusting to 40 miles per hour. Clear skies, no precipitation expected. Good conditions for a winter ascent, if you could handle the cold. I checked their gear under the harsh white glow of the parking lot lights. Jake had a Black Diamond Alpine Pack MSR stove, puffy layers, hard shell, goggles, balaclava, liner gloves, and insulated shells, microspikes, and full mountaineering crampons, ice axe. Simon's setup was nearly identical. Both carried emergency bivy sacks, headlamps with spare batteries, water in insulated bottles, and high-calorie food. Everything was dialed. We're looking at 12 to 14 hours round trip, I said, going over the plan one more time. We'll hit the tree line around sunrise, Boulder Field by mid-morning, Keyhole by noon if we keep a good pace. The crux is the trough. It's going to be filled with snow and ice, probably hard-packed from wind. We'll kick steps, take our time. Once we're through the trough and into the home stretch, it's just steep hiking to the summit. Questions? Weather abort criteria? Simon asked. He was the more cautious of the 2, which I appreciated. If winds hit 50 sustained, we turn around. If visibility drops below 50 feet, we turn around. If anyone shows signs of severe altitude sickness or hypothermia, we turn around. And we're off the summit by 1 p.m. regardless, because I don't trust afternoon weather even on a clear day. They both nodded. We started hiking at 2:15. The first 3 miles were in darkness, headlamps cutting narrow tunnels through the frozen forest. The trail was packed snow over ice, boot prints from previous parties frozen into hard ridges that caught at our microspikes. It was too cold for much conversation. We hiked in silence, breath freezing into ice crystals on our balaclavas, fingers already going numb despite liner gloves and shells. We broke out of the tree line just as dawn was turning the eastern sky from black to deep purple. The temperature had dropped to 5 degrees. Long's Peak rose ahead of us, a massive pyramid of snow-covered granite with the sheer east face, the diamond catching the first light. It looked impossibly high from here, impossibly far. Beautiful, Jake breathed, stopping to take a photo with his phone. It was beautiful. It was also lethal. At this temperature, exposed skin would frostbite in minutes. A fall in the ice would be catastrophic. The altitude, we were already at 11,000 feet, and climbing would steal your breath and your judgment if you weren't careful. We kept moving. The boulder field started around 10,000 feet and stretched for nearly 2 miles. In summer, it's a tedious scramble over house-sized chunks of granite. In winter, it's a maze of snow-filled gaps and ice-covered rocks. This is where people break ankles, where they fall into crevices between boulders and have to be hauled out by search and rescue. We moved carefully, testing each step, using our ice axes for balance. The sun was fully up now, but providing no warmth. The wind had picked up, gusting to maybe 25 miles per hour, enough to steal heat through our layers. We were halfway through the boulder field when Simon stopped. "You guys hear that?" I pulled down my balaclava. "Hear what?" Voices. Behind us. Sounds like someone calling. I turned around. The trail behind us was empty, just the endless field of boulders and snow stretching back toward the tree line. "I don't hear anything. Probably just wind." Jake was looking back too, frowning. "I heard it. It sounded like someone yelling. Maybe another climbing party?" We waited, listening. The wind moaned through the rocks, but I didn't hear voices. We're the only ones who signed the register this morning. Doubt anyone else started this early. "Maybe they didn't sign in," Simon said. "Maybe," I agreed. Though winter climbers almost always sign the register. It's your only lifeline if something goes wrong. We kept moving, but Simon kept looking back over his shoulder. We reached the keyhole, a distinctive notch in the ridge that marks the route's namesake, at 11:30. The temperature at 12,700 feet was -2 degrees. The wind had increased to 35 miles per hour sustained, gusting higher. We huddled in the lee of the keyhole, out of the wind, and took a break. I pulled out my thermos of hot water and made instant soup. Jake and Simon did the same. We had maybe 20 minutes before our core temperatures would start dropping, even with all our layers. "How are you guys feeling?" I asked. "Any headache, nausea, dizziness?" "I'm good," Jake said. "A little short of breath, but that's normal." "Same," Simon added. But he kept looking back the way we'd come, through the keyhole, down toward the boulder field. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I keep seeing someone down there. Just for a second, then they disappear behind rocks." I looked. The boulder field was empty. Could be a ptarmigan. They're white in winter, blend right in. Too big for a bird. It looked like a person. "Do you want to wait and see if anyone catches up?" I asked. He hesitated, then shook his head. "No. Let's keep moving. I'm probably just seeing things." The trough was exactly as bad as I'd expected. A steep, narrow couloir filled with hard-packed snow and ice, about 600 vertical feet of exposed climbing. One slip here, and you'd slide all the way back to the boulder field, picking up speed, slamming into rocks. I kicked steps, using my ice axe to test the snow, and Jake and Simon followed in my tracks. It took us 45 minutes to climb the trough. By the time we emerged onto the narrows, a knife-edge traverse with 1,000-foot drops on either side, we were all breathing hard and my calves were burning. The narrows were wind-scoured, bare rock showing through the snow. We had to take off our crampons and rely on boot friction. The exposure was severe. To the left, straight down to Glacier Gorge. To the right, straight down to the boulder field. The wind hammered us, threatening to blow us off the ridge. We moved one at a time, watching each other, no one speaking because the wind stole the words from our mouths. That's when I saw it. Behind Simon, maybe 30 feet back, something was moving. A shape human-sized, crawling along the narrows on all fours. I blinked hard, thinking it was altitude playing tricks. But it was still there, and it was getting closer. "Simon!" I shouted. "Behind you!" He turned, lost his balance for a second on the narrow ridge, caught himself. "What?" I pointed. The shape had stopped moving. It crouched on the ridge, perfectly still. "What is that?" Jake had seen it too now. We all stared. The shape was maybe 40 feet away, hunched against the wind. It was wearing clothes, dark jacket, pants, but something about its proportions was wrong. The arms were too long. The way it crouched was too low, like its joints bent the wrong way. "Hello?" I called out. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" It didn't respond. It just crouched there, and even from this distance I could feel it watching us. "That's not a person," Simon said quietly. The shape started moving again, crawling toward us with jerky, unnatural movements. "Fast. Go," I said. "Move. Now." We scrambled across the narrows, not being careful anymore, just trying to put distance between us and whatever that was. I could hear it behind us, the scrape of hands and feet on rock, moving faster than anything should be able to move at this altitude. We hit the home stretch, the final 800 feet to the summit, a steep snow slope, and started climbing. My lungs were on fire. The altitude was crushing. Every step felt like moving through molasses. I looked back once. The thing was at the base of the home stretch, maybe 50 yards behind us. It had stopped crawling. Now it was standing upright. And even from this distance, even through my snow fog goggles, I could see its face. It was Jake's face. Perfect copy. Same beard, same nose, same eyes, except the eyes were wrong. They were black, completely black. "Don't look at it," I gasped. "Just climb." We climbed. My vision was starting to tunnel from the exertion and altitude. 14,000 feet, -5 degrees, 40-mile-per-hour winds. My body was shutting down non-essential functions to keep my core warm and my brain oxygenated. We reached the summit at 12:40. The actual peak of Long's Peak is a flat area about the size of a football field, wind-scoured bare rock and a few stunted cairns marking the high point. The views stretched for 100 miles in every direction, the entire front range laid out like a map. We collapsed on the summit, gasping. I pulled out my radio, the one that only worked line of sight to the valley, and called in our summit. "Long's Peak Summit Team. This is Trevor Hale. 3 climbers on top at 12:40, descending immediately. Static." Then, "Copy that, Trevor. Congratulations. Weather's holding. Safe descent." I clicked off the radio and turned to Jake and Simon. 5 minutes. Then we start down. Simon was staring back the way we'd come. "It's still there." I followed his gaze. The thing was standing at the top of the home stretch, right at the edge of the summit plateau, 50 feet away. It wasn't alone anymore. There were 3 of them now, Jake's duplicate, standing in the center, and on either side 2 more. One looked like Simon, one looked like me. We stared at our own faces staring back. "What are they?" Jake whispered. I didn't have an answer. They started walking toward us, moving in perfect unison, their feet making no sound on the rock. "We need to go," I said. "Back the way we came. Now." "They're blocking the route," Simon said, and he was right. The only way down was past them. "Then we go around. North face route. It's steeper, but we can rappel if we have to." "We don't have rope," Jake said. "Then we down climb. Move." We scrambled across the summit, heading for the north side of the peak. The duplicates followed, matching our pace exactly. When we ran, they ran. When we stopped, they stopped. We reached the north edge and looked down. Steep. Very steep. 4th class scrambling at minimum. Maybe low 5th class in places. doable in summer. In winter, with ice and snow and exhaustion and altitude, it was suicide. But the duplicates were getting closer. We don't have a choice, I said. I'll go first. Test the route. If I make it 50 feet, follow me. I started down, facing into the rock, using my hands and feet, searching for holds. The rock was covered in verglas thin ice that made everything slippery. My hands were so cold I could barely feel the holds. I made it 20 feet when I heard Simon scream. I looked up. The duplicates had reached them. Jake was backing away from his double, toward the edge. Simon was swinging his ice axe at the thing that wore his face. Don't engage, I shouted. Just climb down. But it was too late. Jake's duplicate lunged forward with impossible speed, grabbed Jake by the jacket, and pulled him close. For a second, they were face to face, perfect mirrors of each other. Then Jake started screaming. Not pain, something worse, like his mind was being torn apart. His duplicate released him, and Jake collapsed, his body going rigid, foam coming from his mouth. Jake! Simon scrambled toward his brother. No. I started climbing back up, but I was too slow, too far away. Simon reached Jake just as Jake's duplicate turned toward him. I saw Simon raise his ice axe, saw the duplicate grab it mid-swing, saw them struggle. Then Simon's duplicate appeared behind him, wrapped arms around him from behind, and Simon went rigid too, the same horrible screaming, the same foam. I was 10 feet from the top when both duplicates looked directly at me. My own duplicate was standing between them, staring down at me with my own eyes. I made a decision. I let go. I fell 20 feet, hit a ledge, felt something crack in my ribs, kept sliding. 30 more feet, hitting outcroppings, my ice axe torn from my grip, my pack slamming into my back. I tried to self-arrest with my hands, but there was nothing to grab. 40 feet, 50. I hit a snowfield and stopped, gasping, my entire body screaming in pain. I looked up. The summit was far above me now. I couldn't see the top, couldn't see Jake or Simon or the things that had taken them. I don't remember the descent clearly. I know I crawled for some of it. I know I fell more than once. I know that somewhere around 12,000 feet I threw up, and the vomit froze to my balaclava. I made it to the boulder field just before dark. A search and rescue team found me at the trailhead at 8 p.m., hypothermic and delirious. They went up the next day. 3 teams, 20 rescuers total. They found Jake and Simon on the summit, sitting next to each other, backs against a cairn, frozen solid. No injuries except frostbite. The official report says they summited, got disoriented in the cold and altitude, and died of hypothermia, that I had descended alone, leaving them behind. The report says I was suffering from severe altitude sickness and cold-induced psychosis when I reported duplicate climbers on the radio. The report says there were only 3 sets of tracks on the mountain, mine, Jake's, and Simon's. But here's what the report doesn't say. When they brought the bodies down, Jake's eyes were completely black, so were Simon's. The medical examiner noted it as possible hemorrhaging due to hypothermia. When they went through Simon's camera, the last photo he took at the summit showed 4 people, Jake, me, Simon, and a 4th person standing behind them. The 4th person's face was blurred, but you could see it was wearing Simon's jacket. And when I was in the hospital, recovering, Jake's wife visited me. She said Jake had called her from the summit. At 12:50, 10 minutes after we'd summited, she said he sounded strange, his voice flat, and he told her he was coming home soon. Our radio log shows we left the summit at 12:45. There's no cell service on Longspeak. There's never been cell service on Longspeak. I didn't kill Jake and Simon, but I also didn't save them. Something on that mountain took them, wore their faces, and sent them home in bodies that looked right but weren't. And I don't know if it's still up there, waiting. I don't guide anymore. I can't. Every time I look at a mountain, I see my own face staring back from the summit. The frostbite took 3 fingers on my left hand and part of my right ear. The nightmares took everything else. If you're planning a winter 14er, know this. Sometimes you meet other climbers on the mountain who don't belong there. If you see someone who looks exactly like you or your climbing partner, Turn around immediately. Don't try to understand it. Don't engage with it. Just descend as fast as you can. And if someone in your party starts acting strange after encountering it, if their voice goes flat, if their eyes look wrong, they're not coming home. Whatever comes down the mountain might have their face and their memories, but it's not them anymore. I learned that the hard way. Jake and Simon's funeral was last month. Closed casket, at the family's request. I didn't go. I couldn't face seeing their wives, their parents, knowing what I know. Knowing that something is walking around in their bodies. Something that learned how to pass for human at 14,000 feet in the thin, cold air. Something that's still learning. If you made it this far, if you're planning that winter climb, remember, the summit isn't worth your life, and it's definitely not worth whatever the hell is waiting up there. Turn around. Go home. Some peaks are meant to stay unclimbed. Story 4. What we found in the North Cascades. I should have turned back the moment we found the abandoned campsite, but I didn't, and now 2 of my oldest friends are missing and no one believes me about what took them. My name is Ethan Cross. I'm 34 years old and I work as a software engineer in Seattle. This isn't a story about my job or my normal life. This is about what happened on the Copper Ridge Trail in the North Cascades during the 3rd week of August, 2023, and why I'll never set foot in those mountains again. I need to write this down while the memories are still clear, before the investigators convinced me that what I saw wasn't real, that trauma and exhaustion created false memories, that my friends simply got lost or fell or made bad decisions. I know what I saw. I know what followed us through those mountains for 3 days, and I know that whatever it was, it's still up there. The trip was supposed to be a reunion. Me, Tyler Brooks, and Sean Murphy, we'd been best friends since college at the University of Washington, back when we were all broke students, sharing a basement apartment in the U District and spending every weekend hiking in the Cascades. After graduation, we'd scattered Tyler to Portland for a job with Nike, Sean to San Francisco for a tech startup, me staying in Seattle. We tried to keep the tradition alive, meeting up a few times a year for backpacking trips, but life had gotten in the way. Jobs, relationships, responsibilities. It had been almost 2 years since our last trip together. The North Cascades seemed like the perfect place for a reunion. Remote, spectacular, challenging enough to feel like an adventure, but not technical enough to require specialized gear. We'd planned a 4-day, 3-night loop. Start at the Hannigan Pass trailhead, hike up to Copper Ridge, traverse the ridge for 2 days with views that would make your chest ache, then drop down to Chilliwack River and loop back. Total mileage, 34 miles. Elevation gain, 7,000 feet spread over the route. Difficulty, strenuous but manageable for experienced hikers. We met at the trailhead on August 17th at 9 in the morning. The parking lot was nearly empty midweek in late August, after the summer crowds, but before fall colors brought the leaf peepers. Perfect timing. Tyler pulled up in his Tacoma just as I was transferring my gear from my Subaru. He looked good, tanned and fit, his red hair longer than I remembered. Cross! He bear hugged me hard enough to crack my back. God, it's been too long. Sean arrived 20 minutes later, apologizing for hitting traffic coming up from SeaTac. He'd flown in from San Francisco that morning, looking exhausted but excited. We spent 30 minutes in the parking lot going through gear checks, old habits from our college outdoor club days. Everyone had appropriate packs, good boots, water filtration, layers, first aid kits, bare canisters for food storage. Radio? I asked. No cell service up here anyway, Tyler said. And we're not doing anything technical. We'll be fine. I had a Garmin InReach Mini in my pack, a satellite communicator that could send SOS signals and basic texts. I didn't mention it because I didn't want to seem paranoid. In hindsight, I should have told them. Should have made sure everyone knew we had emergency communication capability. We started hiking at 10:15. The trail began in dense old-growth forest, Douglas fir and western hemlock towering overhead, the air thick with the smell of decomposing needles and damp earth. The path was well maintained, smooth dirt with occasional roots and rocks. We fell into an easy rhythm, Tyler setting the pace up front, Sean in the middle, me bringing up the rear. The conversation flowed like no time had passed at all. Tyler's relationship drama with his girlfriend who wanted him to move to Seattle. Sean's startup that was hemorrhaging money but might get acquired. My boring, stable job and equally boring, stable life. We laughed about college, about the time we'd gotten lost in the Alpine Lakes wilderness and had to bushwhack for 6 hours to find the trail, about the time Sean had accidentally set his sleeping bag on fire. We hiked through the morning, climbing steadily. The forest began to thin as we gained elevation, the trees getting smaller and sparser. By early afternoon, we'd broken out above tree line onto Copper Ridge proper. The view stole whatever breath the altitude hadn't already taken. To the north, Mount Shuksan rose like a white pyramid, glaciers gleaming in the afternoon sun. To the south, Mount Baker dominated the skyline. Between them, ridge after ridge of jagged peaks stretched to the horizon, a sea of gray stone and permanent snowfields. The ridge we were on was narrow in places, with steep drop-offs on both sides into deep valleys. We stopped for lunch at a rocky outcrop with 360 views, sandwiches and trail mix and water. The temperature was in the mid-60s, with a steady breeze from the west. Perfect conditions. That's when Tyler pointed to something down in the valley to our east. "Is that a camp?" he asked. I followed his gaze. About 1,000 feet below us, tucked into a small meadow near the tree line, I could see a tent. A single green tent with what looked like gear scattered around it. "Huh?" Sean said, pulling out his binoculars. "Yeah, that's definitely a camp, but I don't see anyone moving around." We watched for a few minutes. The tent just sat there, door flapping slightly in the wind. No people, no movement except the door. "Maybe they're out day hiking," I suggested. "Maybe," Tyler said, but he sounded uncertain. "Seems weird to leave your door open, though, and all that gear just scattered around." We debated hiking down to check on them, but that would have added 3 or 4 hours to our day and taken us off our planned route. We decided to report it to a ranger when we got out, in case someone needed assistance. We kept hiking. The first campsite we'd planned to use was at Egg Lake, a small alpine tarn about 6 miles from the trailhead. We arrived around 5 in the afternoon, tired but in good spirits. The lake was perfect, crystal clear water reflecting the surrounding peaks, a few decent flat spots for tents, and nobody else around. We set up camp quickly. 3 tents in a loose triangle around a flat rock we'd use as our kitchen area. Tyler got his MSR stove going and started heating water for freeze-dried meals. Sean filtered water from the lake. I hung our bare canisters from a tree branch about 50 yards from camp. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, we sat on the rock eating our dinners and watching the alpenglow paint Mount Shuksan pink and gold. This was what I'd missed. This feeling of being so far from civilization that the normal world seemed like a dream, just mountains and friends and the absolute silence of wilderness. Except it wasn't quite silent. Around 8:30, as the light was fading, we heard something. A voice, distant and faint, coming from down the ridge the way we'd come. "Help." Single word. Flat. Almost emotionless. We all heard it. We all looked at each other. "Someone's in trouble," Sean said, already standing up. "Wait." Tyler held up a hand. "Listen." We listened. The voice came again. "Help." Same tone. Same flatness. No urgency. No fear. Just the word. "That's weird," I said. "Why would someone call for help like that?" "Help." It was getting closer. I grabbed my headlamp and turned it on, scanning the ridge. The trail was visible for maybe 100 yards before it disappeared around a rocky outcrop. Nothing moved in my beam. "Help." Closer still. Maybe 50 yards away now, just beyond where I could see. "Hello?" Tyler called out. "Do you need assistance? We can help you." No response. Then, "Help." The voice sounded like it was right at the edge of my headlamp beam, but there was no one there. "I don't like this," Sean said quietly. "Something's not right." "Help." Now it was coming from a different direction. Behind us, from the direction of the lake. I spun around. headlamp cutting through the darkness. The lake shore was empty. Help. To our left, from the steep slope leading down into the valley. Help. To our right, from the rocky ridge above camp. It was surrounding us. Multiple voices now, all saying the same word in the same flat tone, coming from all directions. My skin went cold despite my down jacket. Get in the tents, I said. Now. We scrambled for our tents. I dove into mine, zipping it shut, my heart hammering. I could still hear the voices outside circling the camp. Help, 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 over and over, from different directions, sometimes overlapping so it sounded like a chorus. Then they started saying our names. Ethan. My blood froze. That was Tyler's voice. But Tyler was in his tent 15 feet away. Sean. My own voice. Calling Sean's name. Tyler. Sean's voice. The voices circled for hours. Sometimes they'd stop for 10 or 15 minutes and I'd think it was over, then they'd start again. Sometimes they'd be right outside my tent, so close I could hear breathing, but whenever I looked through the mesh window, there was nothing there, just darkness and the faint shapes of the other tents. Around 2 a.m, the voices finally stopped. The silence was absolute, oppressive. I lay in my sleeping bag, rigid with fear, unable to sleep. When dawn broke at 6, I unzipped my tent and crawled out. Tyler and Sean emerged from their tents at the same time, all of us looking haggard and terrified. What the fuck was that? Tyler asked. I don't know, I said. But we're leaving. We're hiking back to the trailhead right now. Sean nodded vigorously. Agreed. Let's pack up and get out of here. We broke camp in 20 minutes, shoveling our gear into our packs with shaking hands. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something watching us from the tree line or the ridge, but the morning was clear and calm and empty. We started hiking at 7:30, moving fast, almost jogging on the easier sections of trail. No one spoke. We just wanted to put distance between ourselves and that campsite. We'd hiked about 2 miles when Tyler stopped abruptly. Guys, he said, his voice tight, that abandoned camp we saw yesterday, the one down in the valley. What about it? I asked. I think we should check on it. Something feels wrong. Are you insane? Sean said. We need to get out of here, not investigate random campsites. What if someone's hurt down there? Tyler insisted. What if those voices last night were someone trying to get help and we just hid in our tents? I wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed to keep moving toward the trailhead. But Tyler had a point. What if someone genuinely needed help? 30 minutes, I said. We check the camp, and if there's nothing obviously wrong, we keep moving. We left the main trail and started picking our way down the steep slope toward the valley floor. It took 40 minutes just to reach the tree line, scrambling over loose rock and heather. The abandoned camp was in a meadow just inside the forest. As we got closer, I could see what we'd missed from the ridge. The tent was shredded, not damaged by weather or animals shredded. Long tears in the fabric, as if something with claws had ripped it apart. The gear scattered around the site wasn't just disorganized, it was destroyed. A sleeping bag torn to pieces, feathers everywhere. A backpack with the frame bent at impossible angles. A camp stove crushed flat. And in the center of the meadow, drawn in the dirt with something dark that might have been blood, was a symbol. A spiral with branching lines radiating out from the center. We need to go, Sean whispered. Right now. That's when we heard the breathing. Heavy. Wet. Coming from inside the tree line, just beyond our view. Something moved in the shadows between the trees. Something big. We ran. I don't remember the climb back up to the ridge. I just remember running, my pack slamming against my back, my lungs burning. Tyler and Sean crashing through the brush beside me. Behind us, I could hear something following. Not trying to catch us. It could have caught us easily if it wanted to. Just following, pacing us, letting us know it was there. We hit the main trail and kept running, not stopping, until we'd put 2 miles between us and that valley. When we finally collapsed, gasping, Tyler was crying. What was that? He kept saying. What the fuck was that? I don't know, I said. But we need to keep moving. Fast. We hiked hard for the next 4 hours, barely stopping. The trail stretched on forever, every turn revealing another mile of ridge, another valley to cross. The sun climbed higher, the temperature rising into the 70s, and we were sweating through our layers, but none of us wanted to stop long enough to shed them. Around 3 in the afternoon, we reached a decision point. The trail split left would take us on our planned route around the loop, another 2 days of hiking. Right would take us on a rougher, less maintained trail that could get us back to the trailhead by late tomorrow if we pushed hard. Right, Sean said immediately. I want out of here. Tyler and I agreed. We turned right onto the rougher trail. That was our mistake. The trail deteriorated quickly. What had been a well-maintained path became an overgrown route that was barely visible in places. We had to navigate by map and compass, bushwhacking through sections where the trail had been reclaimed by vegetation. The terrain got steeper, rockier, more exposed. We were crossing a particularly nasty scree field when Tyler went down. His ankle rolled on a loose rock and he fell hard, crying out in pain. Sean and I scrambled over to him. His right ankle was already swelling, turning purple. Can you walk? I asked. He tried to stand and gasped in pain. I don't think so. Fuck. I think it's broken. My stomach sank. We were at least 15 miles from the trailhead, on an unmaintained trail, with one person unable to walk. And something was out there in the mountains, following us. I pulled out my Garmin InReach. I'm calling for rescue. Tyler grabbed my arm. No. No rescue. We can't stay here waiting for them. Not with that thing out there. You can't walk, Sean said. Then you'll have to help me. Please. I can't stay here. It'll find us. I looked at Sean. He looked at the darkening sky. It was already 4:30, sun setting early this time of year at this latitude. If we stayed here, we'd be spending the night in the open. If we tried to move with Tyler injured, we'd be moving slowly, in the dark, on dangerous terrain. Both options were terrible. We move, I decided. Sean and I will support Tyler. We get as far as we can before dark. Then we find a defensible campsite. We fashioned a splint from Tyler's trekking poles and started moving. Tyler between us, his arms over our shoulders, hopping on his good leg. It was agonizingly slow. Every 50 yards we had to stop for Tyler to rest, his face white with pain. By 6:30 we'd covered maybe a mile. The sun was setting fast, the temperature dropping. We found a relatively flat spot on a rocky outcrop, not ideal for camping, but it had good visibility in all directions and our backs would be to a cliff face. We set up Tyler's tent. He couldn't sleep outside with his injury, and Sean and I said we'd sleep in shifts, keeping watch. As darkness fell, the voices started again. Help, Ethan, Tyler, Sean. Our own voices calling to each other from the darkness surrounding our rocky outcrop. And then we heard new voices. Voices of people we knew. My mother's voice, calling my name. Tyler's ex-girlfriend. Sean's brother who died in a car accident 5 years ago. Tyler was sobbing in his tent. Sean was sitting next to me, his whole body shaking. It's not real, I kept saying. It's not real. It's trying to lure us out. But it sounded so real. My mother's voice, exactly as I remembered it, telling me she needed help. She was lost in the dark. Please come find her. The voices continued until dawn. When the sun rose, Tyler was gone. His tent was empty. The door was unzipped from the inside. His boots were still there. His pack was still there. He was just gone. Sean and I searched the area frantically, calling his name, but there was no sign of him. No tracks, no blood, nothing. It took him, Sean whispered, while we were sitting right here. It came into the tent and took him, and we didn't hear anything. We should have activated the emergency beacon then. We should have called for rescue, stayed put, waited for help. Instead, we ran. We left Tyler's gear, left everything except our own packs, and we ran down that trail like hell itself was chasing us. Maybe it was. We ran for 6 hours, through terrain that should have killed us, over loose rock and through dense brush and across streams swollen with glacial melt. Somehow we didn't fall, didn't break our ankles, didn't get lost. We ran until we hit the parking lot at 2 in the afternoon on August 19th. My Subaru was still there. Tyler's Tacoma was still there. Everything looked exactly as we'd left it 3 days ago. We drove to the ranger station in Marble Mount and reported Tyler missing. They asked us questions. Where did we last see him? What condition was he in? Why did we leave him? We told them everything. The voices, the abandoned camp, the thing in the trees, Tyler vanishing from his tent. They didn't believe us. They organized a search and rescue operation. 30 people, 2 helicopters, search dogs. They found Tyler's tent and his gear exactly where we'd left them on the rocky outcrop. They never found Tyler. After 3 days, they suspended the active search and listed him as a missing person. The official theory is that he wandered away from camp in the night, disoriented by pain and medication, and fell. They think his body is somewhere in one of the deep ravines, where even the helicopters couldn't spot it. Sean went back to San Francisco and won't return my calls. I heard through mutual friends that he's in therapy, that he's told his therapist he doesn't remember most of the trip, that his mind has blocked it out. I still remember everything. The voices, the shredded tent, the breathing in the trees, Tyler's empty tent, with the door unzipped from the inside. The investigators asked me why I didn't activate the emergency beacon earlier, why I didn't call for help when Tyler was injured, why we left his gear on the mountain. I don't have good answers. Or I do, but they sound insane. I think about going back, hiking into the North Cascades to look for Tyler myself, to prove that something took him, that we didn't just abandon him to die alone in the wilderness. But I can't. Every time I look at a map of the North Cascades, I hear the voices, my mother calling my name, Tyler asking for help in that flat, emotionless tone. The Park Service says the area where we hiked is safe. People use those trails all the time without incident. But 3 weeks ago, a solo hiker found another shredded campsite in the same valley where we saw the abandoned tent. Same pattern gear destroyed, tent ripped apart, the spiral symbol drawn in the dirt. They're calling it bear activity, but I saw the photos the ranger showed me. Bears don't draw symbols. Bears don't arrange torn equipment in perfect circles. And bears don't mimic human voices. I don't know what's in those mountains. I don't know if it took Tyler or if he really did just wander off and fall. I don't know if what we experienced was real or if 3 days without sleep and the stress of the situation created mass hysteria. All I know is that I'm never going back to the North Cascades. And if you're planning a trip there, especially to Copper Ridge or the Chilliwack River area, you should know this. If you hear voices at night calling for help, don't respond. If you hear your own voice or the voice of someone you know, stay in your tent with the door zipped. If you find an abandoned campsite with gear scattered everywhere and strange symbols drawn in the dirt, turn around immediately and hike out. And if someone in your group goes missing, call for rescue immediately. Don't try to find them yourself. Don't run. Because whatever's out there, it's faster than you. It's smarter than you. And it knows how to use your fear and your loyalty and your guilt against you. Tyler's family still calls me sometimes. They want to know what really happened. They want to know why I left their son on a mountain. I tell them what I told the investigators, that he vanished from his tent in the night, that we searched for him, that I don't know where he went. I don't tell them that sometimes, late at night, I hear his voice outside my apartment window, calling my name, asking me to come back, telling me he's lost and he needs help finding his way home. I don't tell them that I'm terrified he's still out there somewhere, wearing Tyler's face and Tyler's voice, waiting for someone else to come looking for him. Story 5. We had exactly 4 hours to make it back to the trailhead before full dark, and the trail markers had started lying to us. My name is Rebecca Walsh, and I'm a 31-year-old physical therapist from Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm not a professional outdoors person or a survival expert. I'm just someone who likes hiking on weekends, who thought a 3-day section of the Appalachian Trail would be a nice way to spend a long weekend in October. I was wrong. This is what happened when the trail markers started changing, when the distances stopped making sense, and when we realized that something in the Smoky Mountains wanted us to stay there after dark. The plan was simple. My girlfriend Jess and I would hike a 28-mile section of the AT from Davenport Gap to the Newfound Gap parking area, spending 2 nights on the trail. It's a popular section, not too technical, well maintained, with established shelters every 6 to 8 miles. We'd done sections of the AT before, knew what we were getting into, had all the right gear. It should have been straightforward. We started at Davenport Gap at 8 in the morning on October 6th, 2023, Friday. The parking area was nearly empty mid-October, is shoulder season in the Smokies, after the summer crowds and before leaf peeper season peaks. The weather was perfect. 52 degrees, clear skies, forecast calling for highs in the mid-60s and lows in the low 40s. No rain predicted for the entire weekend. Jess had the map and I had the GPS app on my phone as backup. The first day's hike was 12 miles to Cosby Knob Shelter, with about 3,000 feet of elevation gain spread over the distance. Moderate difficulty. We'd done harder. Ready? Jess asked, shouldering her pack. She was grinning, excited. This was our first backpacking trip together as a couple. We'd been dating for 8 months, and she'd been wanting to do something like this since we met. She had more hiking experience than me, had done sections of the Pacific Crest Trail and the Long Trail in Vermont. I'd been worried about keeping up with her, but she'd assured me this section was perfect for mixed experience levels. Ready, I said, though I was nervous. Not about the hiking, about being in the wilderness with someone I was still getting to know in some ways. What if we drove each other crazy? What if I couldn't keep pace? What if the romance of backpacking together turned into 3 days of silent resentment? I needn't have worried. The first day was perfect. We hiked through mixed hardwood forest, the leaves just starting to turn patches of yellow and orange against the green. The trail climbed steadily, but never too steeply. We stopped every hour for water and snacks, talking the whole time about everything and nothing. Work drama, family stuff, a stupid argument we'd had the week before about where to get Thai food. Out here, with miles of forest around us and the white blazes of the AT marking our path, everything felt easy. We passed a few other hikers, a couple in their 60s, doing the whole AT southbound, a group of college kids on a weekend trip, a solo guy with an enormous pack who looked like he'd been on the trail for months. Everyone was friendly, the trail camaraderie making you feel connected to strangers just because you were all out here doing the same crazy thing. We reached Cosby Knob Shelter at 5:30 in the afternoon. It's a 3-sided wooden structure with a raised sleeping platform, designed to sleep 12 people in a pinch, but comfortable for 6. We were the only ones there. We set up our sleeping pads and bags on the platform, hung our food bags from the bare cables, filtered water from the nearby spring, and made dinner as the sun set through the trees. That night, lying in our sleeping bags, with the forest sounds around us, Jess reached over and took my hand. "This is perfect," she whispered. "I'm so glad we did this." "Me too," I said, and meant it. I fell asleep feeling happier than I had in months. Day 2 started wrong. We woke at 6:30 to find that our food bags had been taken down from the bare cables and placed neatly on the shelter floor, not torn into or damaged, just carefully placed there, still sealed. "Did you take these down last night?" I asked Jess. "No." "Did you?" We stared at the bags. The bare cables were 20 feet away, the rope still hanging from the metal cable strung between trees. Someone would have had to walk into the shelter while we were sleeping, take down our bags, and set them on the floor without waking us. "Maybe another hiker came through early this morning," Jess suggested, trying to be helpful. But that didn't make sense. Why would someone take down our food and not wake us? And we would have heard someone moving around the shelter. The wooden platform creaked with every step. We ate breakfast quickly, both of us unsettled. By 7:30, we were back on the trail, hiking toward our second night's destination, Tricorner Knob Shelter, 10 miles ahead. The trail was different that day. Not physically, the path was still well maintained, the white blazes still visible every 100 yards or so. But the atmosphere had changed. The forest felt quieter. We didn't see any other hikers. The birds that had been so vocal the day before were silent. and the trail markers started acting strange. About 3 miles in, we passed a wooden sign marking the distance to Tri-Corner Knob Shelter, 7.2 miles. Jess checked her map. That's right, we've done about 3 miles, should be 7.2 to go. We hiked another hour, covering what the GPS said was 2 miles. When we reached the next trail marker, it said 7.2 miles to Tri-Corner Knob Shelter. Jess frowned. That can't be right. We just hiked 2 miles. It should say 5.2. Maybe it's an old sign, I said. They don't always update them. We kept hiking. Another hour, another 2 miles by the GPS. The next marker said 7.2 miles to Tri-Corner Knob Shelter. Okay, this is weird, Jess said. She pulled out the map and GPS trying to figure out where we were. According to the GPS, we've hiked 8 miles total since Davenport Gap. We should only have about 2 miles left to Tri-Corner Knob. But the signs keep saying 7.2. Are we on the wrong trail? I asked. No, we're definitely on the AT. Look, she pointed to a white blaze on a nearby tree, and the terrain matches the map. We're where we should be. The signs are just wrong. We decided to trust the GPS and keep moving, but the next marker we pass, which should have said we were close to the shelter, said 7.2 miles to Tri-Corner Knob Shelter. Every single marker from that point on said the same thing. 7.2 miles. No matter how far we hiked, no matter what the GPS said, every wooden sign and every trail marker insisted we were still 7.2 miles from our destination. I don't like this, I said. Something's not right. Jess was trying to stay calm, but I could see the worry in her face. Let's just keep following the GPS. We'll find the shelter. Except we didn't. By 3 in the afternoon, we'd been hiking for over 7 hours. The GPS said we'd covered 16 miles total. We should have passed Tri-Corner Knob Shelter hours ago, but we hadn't seen it. We hadn't seen any shelter. Just endless forest and trail, and those markers repeating. 7.2 miles. 7.2 miles. 7.2 miles. We need to turn back, I said. Something is seriously wrong. We should go back to Cosby Knob and then hike out to a road tomorrow. Jess checked her phone. It's 3:15. If we turn around now, we'd be hiking back in the dark. The sun sets around 6:30. We don't have enough daylight. Then we camp here, off trail, set up our tent, and wait until morning. We're not supposed to camp off trail in the Smokies, Jess said. It's against park regulations, and we don't have a tent. We were planning to use the shelters. She was right. We'd packed ultralight, relying on the shelter system. No tent, just sleeping bags and pads. What do you want to do? I asked, hearing my voice crack with stress. Jess took a deep breath. We keep going. The shelter has to be ahead of us. The GPS could be glitching, but the trail can't just go on forever. We'll find it. We kept hiking. By 4:30, the light was starting to fade. We'd been passing the same 7.2 mile markers for hours. The forest around us looked identical in every direction, the same trees, the same undergrowth, even the same patterns of leaves on the trail. It was like we were walking through a loop, seeing the same stretch of forest over and over. That's when we saw the hiker. He was standing on the trail ahead of us, maybe 50 yards away. Tall, wearing a faded green jacket and a large pack. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing away from us. Hey, Jess called out. Excuse me. The hiker didn't respond. We walked closer. As we approached, I could see he was an older man, maybe 60, with gray hair visible under his baseball cap. Sir? Jess said. Are you okay? The man turned around slowly. His face was wrong. I can't describe it better than that. All the features were there, eyes, nose, mouth, but they were arranged in a way that didn't make sense. Like someone had described a human face but had never actually seen one and tried to assemble one from memory. Jess grabbed my arm. Run, she whispered. We ran. Behind us, I heard the man start walking. Not running, just walking. His footsteps steady and unhurried on the trail. We ran for 10 minutes, my lungs burning, pack slamming against my back, When we finally stopped to catch our breath, the footsteps had stopped too. "What was that?" I gasped. "I don't know. I don't know." Jess was shaking. His face, did you see his face? That wasn't right. We stood there for a few minutes, listening. The forest was completely silent. No wind, no birds, no insects. Just silence, so complete it felt like being underwater. Then we heard it. Footsteps again, coming from ahead of us now. We turned and looked. The same hiker was standing on the trail in front of us. Same green jacket, same pack, same wrong face. But we'd just run away from him. He'd been behind us. "How did you?" Jess started. The hiker smiled. His mouth opened far too wide, revealing too many teeth. 7.2 miles, he said in a voice that sounded like wind through dead trees. 7.2 miles. 7.2 miles. He ran again, this time off the trail, crashing through the underbrush. Branches whipped at our faces, and our packs caught on bushes, but we didn't stop. We ran until my legs gave out, and I collapsed against a tree, gasping. Jess was bent over, hands on her knees, hyperventilating. "What is happening? What is that thing?" "I don't know," I said, "but we need to get out of here. Now." We pulled out the GPS. It showed we'd run about half a mile off the trail, deeper into the forest, and it was now 5:20. We had maybe an hour of good light left. "We have to get back to the trailhead," Jess said. "We have to get to Davenport Gap before dark." I checked the GPS. According to it, we were about 18 miles from Davenport Gap, 18 miles in 1 hour, through forest, in fading light, with something stalking us. Impossible. "We can't make it," I said. "It's too far." "Then what do we do?" Jess's voice broke. "What do we do, Beck?" I didn't have an answer. That's when we heard voices, multiple voices, coming from different directions around us, all saying the same thing. 7.2 miles. 7.2 miles. 7.2 miles. The voices were getting closer, surrounding us. "Climb," I said. "We climb a tree. Get off the ground." There was a large oak nearby, with low branches. We scrambled up it, our packs making it difficult, but fear gave us strength. We climbed 20 feet up and wedged ourselves into stable positions among the branches. Below us, they came. People. At least a dozen of them, all wearing hiking gear, all with those wrong faces. They walked through the forest with jerky, unnatural movements, their heads turning in sync as they searched. 7.2 miles. 7.2 miles. They circled our tree. Some of them stopped and looked up. Their eyes were black, completely black, like pools of oil. One of them started climbing. Its movements were all wrong. It moved like a spider, limbs bending at angles that should have been impossible. It climbed fast, too fast. "Higher," Jess hissed. We climbed higher, into thinner branches that swayed under our weight. The thing kept coming, its wrong face tilted up toward us, that too wide smile never changing. 7.2 miles, it whispered. It was 10 feet below us when the branch it was on snapped. The thing fell, hitting the ground with a wet thud. It lay there for a moment, limbs twisted, then slowly pulled itself upright and rejoined the circle of hikers around our tree. They waited. We stayed in that tree for 3 hours, shivering in the cold, watching those things circle below us. They never left. They just walked in slow circles, occasionally looking up at us, repeating that phrase over and over. 7.2 miles. As the sun set and darkness fell, I realized we were going to die up here. We'd freeze overnight, or we'd fall asleep and fall, or we'd run out of water and eventually have to come down. That's when Jess touched my arm. "Look," she whispered, pointing. In the darkness, I could see lights. Not flashlights, something else. A faint blue-green glow, like foxfire or bioluminescence, coming from deeper in the forest. The hikers below us saw it too. Their heads all turned in unison toward the lights. Then, without a word, they started walking toward it, leaving our tree, disappearing into the darkness. We waited 30 minutes after they'd gone, barely breathing, listening to the forest. Silence. We need to move, Jess whispered. Now, while they're gone, we follow the GPS back to the trail and we hike out. We don't stop. We don't look back. We just go. We climb down carefully in the darkness, using our headlamps. Every sound made us freeze. A branch cracking, leaves rustling, but nothing came for us. We found the trail again using the GPS. According to the app, we were 19 miles from Davenport Gap, 19 miles in full darkness. We started walking fast, almost jogging when the terrain allowed it. We didn't talk, just focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The headlamps created small pools of light that made the surrounding darkness feel absolute. We'd been hiking for an hour when we saw the first trail marker in our headlamp beams. 6.1 miles to Davenport Gap. Different number, not 7.2. My heart leaped with hope. We hiked faster. The next marker, 4.8 miles to Davenport Gap. Then 3.2 miles. Then 1.7 miles. We were getting closer. The numbers were counting down. We were going to make it. The parking area appeared out of the darkness at 9:47 p.m. My Subaru was still there, exactly where we'd left it. So was Jess's Honda. We threw our packs in the back and got in, locking the doors. I started the engine with shaking hands and backed out of the parking space so fast I nearly hit a tree. We drove in silence for 20 minutes, putting miles between us and the trailhead, before either of us spoke. What were those things? I finally asked. I don't know. Jess's voice was flat, emotionless. Shock. I don't know what they were. We drove to a hotel in Gatlinburg and got a room. Neither of us slept. We just sat up in bed with all the lights on, staring at nothing. In the morning, we discussed whether to report what happened. But report what? That we saw hikers with wrong faces? That trail markers were lying to us? That we'd run off trail and climbed a tree? We'd sound insane. We decided to let it go. Try to forget. Move on. Except we couldn't. Jess started having nightmares. Waking up screaming about things with wrong faces climbing through her window. She stopped hiking altogether. Stopped going outside more than necessary. We broke up 3 weeks later. Not because we wanted to, but because every time we looked at each other, we remembered that forest, those things, the terror. I tried to go back to normal life. But 2 months after the trip, I was at the grocery store when I saw one of them, a woman in the produce section, looking at apples. Her face was wrong in that same subtle way, all the parts there, but assembled incorrectly. She turned and looked directly at me. 7.2 miles, she said quietly. I dropped my basket and ran. I've seen them 4 more times since then. Different people, different places, always with the wrong faces, always saying that phrase. I moved out of Knoxville last month, changed my phone number, told my friends and family I needed a fresh start. But I know I can't run far enough because last week I was checking my trail apps out of habit. I don't hike anymore, but I still look sometimes and I noticed something strange. The Tri-Corner Knob Shelter location on every map, every GPS app, every trail guide shows it as being 7.2 miles from Cosby Knob Shelter. I know we hiked way farther than that. I know we passed dozens of markers saying 7.2 miles. I know we walked for hours and hours and never found it. But according to every official source, that's the distance, 7.2 miles. Which means either I'm losing my mind or the trail itself has been changed, modified to match what those things wanted us to believe. And if they can change the maps, if they can change the trail markers, if they can change official records, what else can they change? I deleted all my trail apps last night, threw away my hiking gear. I'm never going back to the mountains, but I still see them. In crowds, in parking lots, at the gym, people with wrong faces who turn to look at me and mouth those words, 7.2 miles. I don't know what they want. I don't know why they let us go, but I know they haven't forgotten about us. And I don't think they're done. If you're planning to hike the Appalachian Trail, especially the section through the Smokies, pay attention to the trail markers. If you start seeing the same distance repeated over and over, if the numbers stop making sense, turn back immediately. Get off the trail before dark. And if you see hikers with faces that look wrong, even if you can't explain why they look wrong, don't approach them. Don't engage. Just leave. Some trails lead exactly where they're supposed to, and some trails lead somewhere else entirely. We found out which kind we were on. I just hope you never do.